So welcome to our 161st episode under Transliterature series. We've had a longish break in November due to all these celebrations happening all around. But coming back to speak with authors, thought leaders, and cheer leaders, as well as all the change makers, is something I really, really look forward to. So today we have with us Ashis Roy. He's a psychoanalyst, he's a researcher, writer, and author of a fantastic book, Intimacy in Alienation, which we are going to discuss today. It really tackles some very, very bold and heavy topics with, I must say, remarkable intellectual capabilities. So hats off to you, Ashish, for successfully addressing such a complex subject. Welcome to our platform.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this conversation, and I'm really looking forward to talking about the book with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would rather, really like to start with the fact that, this has been an inspirational book. But what really inspired you to write this book? And perhaps to begin with, you can also tell us that why did you decide to write on Hindu-Muslim relationships and your inspiration on such a delicate and politically charged subject?
Yeah, so this began with kind of a quest that I encountered when I was studying as a psychology student in my master's. And I wanted to understand that there is so much violence that always gets talked about between Hindus and Muslims, and there have been different histories over time, and different histories are narrated at different points of time for their own reasons. I wanted to understand that how do a Hindu and Muslim fall in love uh, in the middle of all these histories, which in some ways forbid them from falling in love, and how do they make sense of the group identity, which is so dominant in our society. And do they always see each other as Hindu and Muslim in the way their groups have taught them to see? Or do they begin to see each other and love each other in different ways? So I was looking at how histories and violence and meanings of different communities get translated and interpreted in the context of love and intimacy. And because psychoanalysis is my discipline, which looks at desire, it looks at love, it looks at relationships in the interpersonal, intrapsychic, and in the context of the group, I thought that uh, it's also a responsibility on my part as a psychologist and a psychoanalyst to explore all these questions from a psychological perspective, which doesn't nullify the complexity of the political narratives, but many a times the political narratives are too hegemonic to actually begin to look at what is happening in individuals.
Very well said, because the way you've written this book definitely, it brings about the fact that you're doing it for more than just the reason of writing this book. It's more to do with the fact that you're trying to explore the reasons. But in comparison to other disciplines, how do you think psychoanalysis really helps us to understand the Hindu-Muslim conflict? How is it different from other disciplines that it makes us really, have this perspective like you have, very humane touch to the entire thing, the very humane approach to the entire, I would say, the whole conflict that we have had over the years over this issue, very sensitive one, I must say.
I think the special thing that psychoanalysis brings to the social sciences and at large is its nuanced and sensitive understanding to trauma, to intergenerational trauma, to individual life history and its origins, to parts of our life which are getting repressed but still getting played out every day. And it really helps us to see that there is a part of psychic life which is known as the unconscious, um, which was formulated by Sigmund Freud, which has a lot of buried strength which one needs to look at, both from what is happening within the family and what is happening at the level of the group. So it is one of the, perhaps one of the most, or maybe the only discipline which actually looks at the individual life in a such a nuanced way. And that's why I am drawn to it, because I work as a psychoanalyst. And I wanted to explore this question outside the clinic of psychoanalysis, that how do individuals who fall in love, how do they translate this love to themselves when the society around them is not giving them too many meanings for translation? That was one of my questions and concerns.
Do you also think that, the storytelling and the psychoanalysis really plays a big role in fostering cross cultural identity? Do you think that really helps and would help in future? How does it go?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very interesting question. I think psychoanalysis is so poignant in looking at the fact that people are always carrying multiple truths, whereas politics often makes us look at positions which are polarized. So I really wanted to bring out the fluidity in the Hindu and the Muslim self, especially in the space of the couple, and to make people see that maybe there are moments and times when they forget that they are Hindu and Muslim. So what is the new way in which they are looking at themselves? So I think when it comes to exploring the depth of human subjectivity, psychoanalysis is a very, very powerful tool. And at the same time, it is also helpful in seeing that what all is the individual negotiating at the level of the group, which is putting pressure, or is it creating spaces for expression. And it is these different nuances that can be captured by a perspective, which was my prerogative.
In your book, you also mention about identity. You mention about negative identity. And could you please elaborate on it? And also in context of how Sudhir Kakkar has actually influenced your writing. Maybe we can connect the both.
It's always a sad note to talk about Sudhir Thakkar because he is no more.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, my book came out just 1 or 2 days before he died. And his own work, whether it's intimate relations or the colors of violence, or um, the book on Tara Shikho, Crimson Throne, have been significant ways in which Sudhir Thakkar has engaged with the Hindu-Muslim question. And those were beginning points for me to look at how psychoanalysis in India has looked at the Hindu-Muslim question. Uh, Sudhir Kakkar was one of the few analysts in India who really brought about how in India the identity is shaped by the group identity.
Hmm.
And Erik Erikson was his mentor. Erik Erikson was a psychoanalyst who was known as the architect of identity in the 60s and 70s. And his idea of the negative identity talks about the fact that when individuals identify with those things which the community disavows or prohibit them from identifying, which the community looks down upon, um, what happens to them? So he thought that he found through his case studies that there are individuals who are pushed to the extremes of society, and the society begins to see them as aliens, or the society begins to see them as strangers. So I use Erickson's work to think about the question that if a Hindu girl is constantly told, don't marry a Muslim, and often it is expressed in unsaid terms, which is also a very important thing, that you may feel that you are being educated in a secular environment and you have friends who are secular, but you know that inscription inside you that you can't marry a Muslim. but you still go and fall in love with somebody who's a Muslim, or the other way around, that a Muslim falls in love with a Hindu. So that is a negative choice in one way. And um, how does the community look at that identity? What happens to you when you choose that identity? How do you explain that of the other, quote unquote, the other, to people around you? How is it that when the two of you have a child, what kind of an identity will he have? Because he will have the identity of both the Hindu and Muslim parent. Do the parents want to forget their religion? Can they actually forget religion? And so the negative identity was a framework. I
Mm.
don't stick to it. I also revisit it as a concept in my work, but it really gave me a very important way of looking at um, what happens to alienated identifications in people when they identify with elements which their community doesn't see as positive elements.
Very right. But in this broader scheme of the things, how did you really understand love jihad in the course of this work? How did you really understand the very concept? I'm sure since you went so deeper through this analysis. So, how did you really understand through your own work the meaning of love jihad, very concept of love jihad that we talk about so often and we use the word so loosely without really understanding the main concept?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate to use this word, which has become a way of signifying all Hindu Muslim love, and it has a very fixed meaning in which one community is trying to uh, take over or forcefully mm, uh, pressurize usually women of another community to fall in love, or forcefully fall in love, or maybe it's not even love. But if I look at the sample of my book, it's and it's coincidental that all of them are Muslim men married to
Mm,
Hindu women. All of the relationships are democratic. No one was forced to marry anybody. They are all middle class, professionals, educated, um, not very well to do, but extremely nuanced in their thinking, uh, talking about how two religions can exist in the space of the relationship. Should they exist? Should religious practices be allowed? And the most significant thing that I found was that the Muslim men were deeply caring, extremely feminine, uh, not trying to run away from their sensitive parts, and they stood with their wives and their partners in areas of their life where the rest of the family had really withdrawn.
mm,
And that in itself was something which was so deeply fascinating and admirable for me. And I think to answer your question, that is the biggest counterpoint to the narrative of Love Jihad,
mm.
which limits our imagination of this intimacy.
You've mentioned various stories, the various interviews that you took, be it Karuna, be it Sunaina, Kasim, so many of them, Renu, Asim. I remember Askar, Rachna, so many of them that you've mentioned very, very sensitively and handled the interviews so well. But which one did really touch you the most personally as a writer, researcher, somebody who was interviewing them, somebody who was seeing them over some course of time? I know each one, every story of that you mentioned touched me individually in a different way. But what was you the main writer, main interviewer, the way you analyzed it? So which one did really touch you the most?
It's very difficult to choose, but I must say that, all of them have nuances which touched me a lot. Like in Karuna's life story, she was introduced to Islam at a very young age,
Hmm,
but and she was brought up in a very secular family. But when she started falling in love with men who were Muslim,
hmm,
her family couldn't understand that. So she herself was confused about why was I allowed to, why was I allowed to have this openness towards different faiths. But then I can't myself fall in love with someone who's a Muslim. With Sunaina and Qasim, of course, the context in which their love was born, which was deeply traditional, and uh, the kind of care that Qasim provides for Sunaina
mm,
when she has a very acute breakdown was really significant. In Asghar and Rachna's case, I felt that uh, the way the couple were describing and talking about religion and the future of their daughter,
mm.
and the openness with which they could talk about it, not hide their doubts, live out their anxieties, still think about it and talk about it was really significant. So I think that there are, and these are these are only fragments that I'm pointing out. I think that all of the psychobiographs really have a lot of detail about their life, about their conversations and moments, so and their confusions and struggles, and also their strengths. So for
Mm.
me, it was quite a journey to stay with these couples. Some of them I interviewed for about 3 years. Some
Yes.
of them I was with them for about a year.
Mm.
And I am very thankful to them for letting me uh, into their lives.
Coming back, you earlier mentioned the future of the offspring when you were talking earlier about identity, and also just now we mentioned about Asghar and Rachna and their kind of arguments over practicing religion in front of their daughter. So that brings to me a very, very important question. Could you please share some impressions about the future of the offspring, if we could go in a little bit of a detail of a Hindu-Muslim couple? That becomes definitely a, a sore, a sore point in couples, like it did in the case of Asghar and Rachna. So, how would you like to, perhaps you could talk about it, because sometimes you ignore that vital thing, that yet what happens to the offsprings? How does, if you could elaborate a bit, little bit more on this topic?
Yeah, I think that firstly, it's too much for the couple to find the answer about which religion does the child want to adopt. It's a very scary question.
Hmm.
It kind of reignites the anxiety that they're trying to leave behind, which comes from their family. That if you're a Hindu and if you're married a Muslim, then you're less of a Hindu. And with the offspring, those questions come up again. So couples at times try to say that we will let them decide.
Hmm.
So there are different ways in which the couples navigate this, either by being open about different faiths and teaching their children, the practices of both the faith. Uh, but I think that what I found most significant was that there is no way of escaping the fact that religion is a part of your identity. So in one of the tapes, I found that the father had stopped going to the mosque, but on the day of Eid, the son wanted to wear the skull cap and go to the mosque.
Hmm.
So the son still wanted to have a relationship with that part of the father. The father was trying to forget because religion really can feel like a threat to the choices one has made, depending on where one is located. Uh, so I don't think that religion is something that can be forgotten. But in the case of in Mehni's case, uh, she really faced a huge, violent eruption from the society about whether you are Hindu or Muslim. So the lack of clarity became like an alienated subjectivity for her that she cannot say where she belongs. So there is a homelessness, and I draw reference to a story by Manto, Toba Tek Singh, where after the partition, Toba Tek Singh is bewildered about
Hmm.
where is India, where is Pakistan, and it is that can be one kind of chaos that the offspring has to experience. So I do think that the need help in different ways, culturally, historically, uh, to understand and translate to themselves and to the offspring about the identity that he or she can have. But it's a question which is uh, it has to get symbolized further. It's unfinished.
In this context, I would like you to also share your observation. I mean, how do you see the younger generations addressing the interfaith dynamics as compared to the older generation? What difference do you see? Like you just mentioned, the son wanting to go to the mosque. I mean, there's so many references. How do you see in present context, the present sensitivity? How do you see the younger generation really, really addressing this dynamics of interfaith? What changes do you see, or you feel it's still the same? How would you compare it to the older generation vis-a-vis the younger generation now, the present generation, in the entire dynamics?
Um, I think that the younger generation is definitely much more exposed to different interpretations and different ways in which they can think and explore the meanings of faith and religion. And I think that uh, the younger generation is also growing up in so many different contexts. Like I remember someone talking to me some time back, a young Muslim girl who was saying that I have always um, been educated in a school in which there were mostly Hindus, uh, and I'm working in a metropolitan city. But why do my parents want me to marry a Muslim? So the or I've heard students tell me that actually my parents want me to marry a Hindu so that I feel safe. Uh,
Okay.
so these are all the narratives that I'm presenting from the Muslim side, from people who have known, who have been Muslim. But the point is that identity is not just one thing; it is multiple things, and people are now, at least the younger generation, are situated in multiple contexts. So we cannot focus our understanding of identity as being just one thing. There are different parts of identity, and I do believe that there are definitely some parts of identity which are much stronger than others.
While you were writing this book, and definitely, how much time did it take for you to kind of complete the research and write this book? You've been researching on it for a long time, or how did it happen? Like some stories, as you just mentioned, took you more than 3 years to be kind of conversating, coming to some kind of a conclusion, or no conclusion for that matter. But still, your thoughts, your analysis on the same. So, how did this entire book, a very, very important book, I would say, of our times, take you?
It took me, I think, close to 7 years because this is a part of my doctoral work.
Okay.
And once it became, was passed as a doctoral work, and after that, the process of converting it into a book happened. But it took time, and I think that uh, that time was very important for me to think about things. And there has also been time since the book has been written, so things also grow after you have written a book. So it's an ongoing process. It's not an end. I think it's a beginning of a certain kind.
Of dialogue, I'm sure. Because 7 years and you were planning, executing, writing this book. So at some point, you might have also felt and questioned the feasibility of the book, definitely. So, did you write keeping in mind the writer, and what changes in mindset did you really achieve during this entire 7 years? Did you go through some mindsets, some challenges that you would like to share? And sometimes one does question whether you're going in the right direction, or how does it happen? How did your mindset change? Something that you would like to share with us as a writer going through the process of writing this book. You believed in it.
So
That's
I
why you
think,
wrote, right? But still.
yeah, I think as a psychoanalyst, and I begin with this in the introduction, that when I was much younger, I begin with being in a mental asylum where I was doing an internship, and I was sitting with some very severely disturbed patients, and there was a Muslim patient sitting in front. And all of a sudden, all the hallucinations and the distortions that the patients that I was observing that they were having, they went away. And they started focusing on this Muslim patient, and they said, one of them said that uh, ये मुस्लिम है और अब गंदगी मचाएंगे और अब flies आएंगे, and all of us started staring at that person, and I recounted that incident in my dissertation, and I thought that why do I have this prejudiced way of looking at a Muslim because I'm a Hindu? And that was also a way of looking at a certain kind of violence inside myself and feeling bewildered that I don't have parents who ever told me anything of this kind wherever I absorbed it from. So I think from there, I started thinking about, can this violence find a different meaning? Because I feel that love and any intimate relationship which uh, sustains itself has some kind of love. Can that violence be transformed by love? That's why I wanted to look at the couple. And then I think that when I found so many couples where the Muslim men had played such a major role in transforming the lives
Mm.
of the Hindu women without oppressing them, without forcing them to give up religion or, all those prejudice things that we think about. I think that was really, that was transformative for me. And it changed something in me about how um, I look at the relationship between the two communities. And I must say that I am in a certain generation and I'm looking at it in a certain perspective. I think, and I mentioned this in my book by quoting a very eminent writer and Intizar Hussain. And I credit Professor Alok Bhalla for introducing me to his thought uh, that different generations have different ways of understanding their relationship. So there can be a generation where they feel there's only love. There can be a generation which talks only about the hatred. And you've asked about the young people, and I think it's their responsibility to carry both meanings and not get fossilized into any one. Uh, but I think I would just like to say that the quote of Intizar Hussain that uh, I have both a Hindu and a Muslim inside me. I think that was very, very deeply evocative and moving, and it unraveled in different ways throughout this work.
Very well said, very sensitive. And thoughts like these will only go ahead and make the difference that we all want finally in everybody's mindset and definitely take us forward in India because that is very important. But a significance of this title and the book cover, would you like to elaborate on that? It's very, very interesting, I would say.
Yeah, so a friend and a very generous and sensitive painter, Pratul Das, the book cover has been gifted by him, and it, I think, talks about two different worlds intersecting and coming together, dialoguing with each other. And also, the two spheres have a lot of complexity within themselves and spaces. And the title comes from perhaps one of the papers that I presented, which was which is a part of this book, but also really signifying the fact that uh, the Hindu Muslim couple need a home.
Hmm.
They need a home, and they need a home in history. They need a home uh, in the larger sense of feeling that they belong to the country. They belong to both communities, and I want. I thought that this book can be a way of creating a frame for that home, so that they feel less alienated.
So where do you go from here? What's your next plan? How do you want to, who's your target audience, and what would you like? Finally, perhaps one key takeaway from the book. So all two, three questions together, if you could kind of take them out. The most key takeaway from your point of view about this book, and where do you go from here? How do you see yourself perhaps 2 years later writing so many things that you've still not written mention in the book? How does it go from here?
Well, my wish is that I should be able to would like to interview couples from different countries, from Pakistan, from couples who are situated outside India, who may have uh, they could be Indians or my Pakistanis, and also explore how the two religions intersect and in their in the personal space. So I would really want to continue and take this work forward, and I hope that I must say that according to me, very limited research has been done on this topic, which has an academic uh, perspective. A lot of work has been done on the partition, on Hindu-Muslim relationships, on the political history, and a lot of significant work has been done, but not specifically looking at the Hindu-Muslim couple as uh, as a unit. So I really hope that the book is able to stimulate more research because it is meant to do that. And individuals who are struggling in their relationships or who want to find more meaning and to understand, what is happening to them, I hope that they find this book of some use. Uh, since I was teaching at a medical university, some of my students would say that, my father has bought your book so that he can understand my relationship better.
Mm. Very well said. And any special feedback that you received from your, it's a thumbs up from me, and I'm recommending it to everyone who's interested in this topic. And the style of the book definitely makes it worth reading, and it's definitely opens a lot of dialogue in your mind. But any feedback, particular feedback that you fondly remember about the book that you felt, yes, I went in the right direction. This is what I wanted. This is the kind of feedback I wanted for the book, and I'm getting it.
Well, one is the feedback that I just shared.
Mm.
And, there's a lot of feedback which says that how deeply nuanced and sensitive it is. And then the book has gone for academic review. So I'm looking forward to what they have to say. Uh, but that is where it is at the moment.
Thank you so much, Ashish, for being on a platform and having such a wonderful conversation on a very, very bold topic. I would say it takes a lot of guts to write on this, and you've handled it, I would say, with a lot of empathy and a lot of sensitivity, and with a lot of feelings. And your thought about it, I mean, I would say, are very pure, and you really want to make a difference. Any last words before we call it a day, and look forward to further work from your side in future?
No, thank you. It's been wonderful talking to you, and I am very grateful that you invited me to this conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining in. You'll be able to see the podcast on the YouTube very shortly. And definitely do subscribe to the channel so that more such interviews like today, thought-provoking ideas, thought-provoking books like Intimacy and Alienation, the conversations can reach you. So thank you everyone for joining in. Thank you. Best regards. All the best, Ashish.